What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Today I have a 1952 Farmall H. There's a really cool story behind this. The guy that owns it, it was actually his dad and him own it together, and it was his grandpa bought it brand new for their farm back in 1952. This tractor had sat in a barn for 5 years and didn't run. He was a teacher that I knew from college that I went to. I wore a Farmall sweatshirt one day and he asked me if I'd be interested in fixing it up. He actually has two H's. There's another one down there that I haven't been able to go through yet, but I have gotten this one running. I drove it up to where I'm working on it right now. I've done a little bit of work to it. I'm gonna pull the sheet metal off, and then I'll show you everything I've done so far. And then the next step that I have to do is I have to put a rear main seal in it, so I have to split the tractor in half. And I also have to overhaul the engine and a couple little things. I got to rewire all the lights up, and it needs 2 new front tires. So let me get the sheet metal off and I'll show you what I've done so far. So the first thing, the radiator, well, the whole cooling system is not in the greatest shape. It is a little rusty, but I put some stuff in here. I think I put a baking soda and water, and I ran a couple heat cycles through it just to kind of warm it up a little, see if I can get that stuff flowing and moving around. So I think the radiator will be fine. I don't want to use too harsh of stuff on this since it's so old and it doesn't leak right now, and I don't want it to leak. It's not the worst. The radiator's fine. It's actually the inside of the engine that I'm more concerned about. Over here, we'll start on the other side. So I put a new water pump on. The old one, the pulley was cracked, so I bought a reman pump for that. And then this is the thermostat housing. I pulled that apart and I pulled the thermostat out of it so I can flow more water through it faster to help clean it out. I replaced all the coolant hoses. I completely went through and rebuilt the carburetor top to bottom. I put all new shafts, new jets, new seals and everything. It was gummy. It was salvageable. The body of it, I could have really cleaned it up, but I just disassembled the entire thing, soaked it in carb cleaner, and cleaned it out. I had to put a new oil pressure gauge on. That was cracked and it was leaking. Had to make a new valve cover gasket to drive it because it was leaking so bad that it was putting oil onto the exhaust manifold, and I didn't want it to start on fire. So we can come over to the other side. I converted this over to 12 volt. It used to have a 6 volt generator charge system with a voltage regulator. Those aren't, I don't like those. The batteries go dead about every 2 years. You got to put a new battery in it, and the lights aren't as bright, and everything's 12 volt now. It's way easier to get parts for, and this is just, it's an overall better system. I believe I bought this kit from I think it was Steiner Tractor Parts, and it uses the 1-wire GM alternator. I don't like it. It would work great for an M or a B. It doesn't work great for an H because there's so little room, and this alternator really it takes up all the space. I actually had to clearance the valve cover a little bit. You can see that dent in it. I clearanced it so I could get the alternator to suck in more. I'm not a super big fan of it. The other one I'm going to do, I'm going to actually try to make my own. I did it on my personal H and it worked great. I wanted to try this kit, see how it was. It wasn't that bad of a price. I think the alternator and all the brackets, I want to say it was like 150 bucks or something like that. And then it has a 12 volt resisted coil because I did not put an electronic ignition on this. It still has the points condenser style ignition. So I didn't change any of that. I just used a resisted coil instead. They make those little ballast resistors that you can screw on anywhere you want to. I don't really like those. I think they're gaudy looking. New plugs and new wires. I pulled the fuel tank off. It had some sediment in the bottom and varnished fuel. So I power washed that out and drained it. You can't see. I put a new sediment bowl on it because that was leaking. You couldn't turn the petcock. I had this whole top cover and everything removed off. You can see I painted a few spots. I'm going to paint this eventually. I just painted the spots that you won't get with a paint gun when it's all together. So when I had it apart, I painted everything that I could. I had the top cover off because I was leaking. And I also, this is the hydraulic belly pump that mounts underneath the tractor. I pulled this out. I'm gonna get down to show you. Because up in here, this is the front of the transmission. I had to replace those two seals. I didn't have to split the tractor, I could just drop the belly pan, but now that I have to split it, it would have been way easier that I did that. I didn't really realize the rear main was leaking until I drove it, and I think since it sat so long it dried up, and then that's when it started leaking oil. Put those two seals in, I resealed the top cover, and I checked out the whole rear end. It looked great. I washed it out, got all the old gunky oil out, and put brand new oil in. That's just about all I've done so far. So the next step, I think, we're gonna get this engine tore apart and start getting pistons out, get the oil drained out of it, coolant drained out of it, and then we'll start getting it disassembled and pulled apart and see what we got. No chunks, just a lot of sludge. I think these things hold like, I want to say 4 or 5 quarts of oil. Maybe, I think about that. I'll let that drain out while I get the top end apart. That way when I go to pull the oil pan off, it won't be dripping on my face the entire time and getting in my teeth. I know Vice Grip Garage, he eats a lot of oil, but I'm not a fan. I think we're gonna try to see how big of a mess we can make, because to drain the coolant, it's right up, it's straight above this tire, so you can't get anything directly below it. I made a $400 funnel. I left the cap on so it'd slow the flow, and it looks like it's doing a pretty good job. That is some really brown coolant that's coming out of there. I don't know if you guys can see that color, but looks like we got a lot out, which is good. I mean, the bad color is all stuff that is going to come out of it. This funnel's actually working pretty good. Okay, we're gonna go ahead and get the carburetor and exhaust manifold off. It has a ton of hours on it. The reason I'm overhauling it is it has almost no compression. It runs, but it doesn't run great. I could never get it to the carburetor to dial in correctly, and I think that's just due to the extremely low compression. And when I was talking to the owner, he said the last time it was overhauled was 1958. So six or 7 years after they bought it. Actually, this might be a 1951 H. Yeah, it was 7 years after he bought it. They overhauled it, and it hasn't really been touched since. Oh, and the coolant. I'm pretty much expecting at least all of the exhaust manifold studs to break. Wow. I'll take that if they all come out. Definitely not going to complain. So in this particular engine, you have an intake and 2 exhaust. So that's the exhaust valve in there. It's really hard to just do this. You can see that valve seat's leaking. The overhaul kit I've been looking at, it actually comes with a full head rebuild kit. So I'm gonna put new valve seats, new valves and new valve guides and guide seals in it. Actually doesn't look too bad. Not as bad as I thought. Okay, we're on the other side of the tractor now. Get the alternator off. I took the throttle linkage out, loosened up this thermostat hose. I got to take the steering shaft out, get this wiring harness, get that off, and then we'll be able to get the thermostat out, pull the valve cover, get the rocker shaft off, and just keep slowly working our way down. Every tool's a hammer if you hit it hard enough. Tap a chisel in there to spread them a little bit. So this is a big cast iron nut that retains the bearing for this shaft. I hope this comes out. Yep. I had this all apart once, I just don't remember how tight I got everything. And then in this cover, there's it looks like a half gear. And then on this, the steering shaft, there's a worm gear. So when you're turning the wheel, that worm gear is rotating that half gear side to side, and that's what rolls your, or turns your tires. So a lot of times you just steer it like you're going to steer it. It'll actually just screw right out. And then you just pull them straight through. It needs to go through the radiator too. That's that worm gear on there, bearing in the front that the nut holds in place. Alright, so I went ahead and I pulled the valve cover off. It's just 2 bolts. And it's not the worst in here. When I had this off to replace this valve cover gasket, I kind of scooped some stuff out of there. It was pretty carboned up and gunky before, but after running it, the more I ran it, the better it got. But that just means it's settling down into the pan. That's the thermostat that we took out, and it's actually way better than it was before. A lot of this stuff is like loose paste almost. So I think it'll actually clean up pretty good once we get it all apart and clean this head out. I don't know. I'll probably just power wash it really good. I might have it crack checked, but these heads normally don't ever crack on these. So we'll get this rocker shaft off and pull the head. And I think this is the oil tube that I think that sprays oil onto the rocker shaft to keep everything well lubricated. And there's also right here, this comes up, and I think that runs through here as well to lubricate everything. This might be for the valves. I'm not exactly sure. I kind of use these like adapter fittings on everything. So you can't just unscrew it with one wrench. You can hold the adapter with one wrench and then unscrew the fitting itself with another. I don't know why they wouldn't just put the same fitting in, but I'm sure there's a reason for it. Then with my push rods, piece of cardboard, number it so then you know where all your push rods go. And I would just like to look at them, make sure they're not bent before just when I pull them out. Oh, there's a fitting on the back of the head. And every time I pull it up, it's hitting on the steering support bracket. That's why. Right there. Okay, round two. Ah. Alright, I gotta take the oil pressure line off because when I pick it up, I can't quite clear the studs before I hit that. Third time has to be the charm, right? Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Oh. There you go. Total piece of cake. Oh yeah. There is. Wow, that's actually like a. Oh, I'd say that's at least. That one's not as bad as this one. Maybe 2/1000, 3/1000 of a ridge, and it's a sharp, solid ridge. No cross hatches left whatsoever. I'll pick you guys up and show you what we got here. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but they're very polished. There's pretty much no crosshatch left whatsoever. Which, I mean, it's to be expected. This thing hasn't been overhauled in 70 years, so they're a little carboned up at the tops. I could tell when I drove this, I actually had chunks of carbon flying out of the exhaust and they'd hit me in the face, and they kind of hurt a little bit. At first I thought these coolant passages were plugged, which they are, but in the head there is no coolant that flows through those ports. Another thing to see is you can the exhaust valve on 1, 2, and 4 are like a gold color from the combustion, but number 3 they're both dark, and that's telling me that there was a lot of oil getting pushed past piston rings in this cylinder, which that'd be a main reason. It kept fouling plugs, is I think a reason they parked it, and I think that's the main culprit for that reason, which we're gonna fix. So these are a sleeved engine. You can see the sleeves on here. And I have a puller, so the next thing I'd like to do is this is the tappet cover. I like to get this off and look at the cam followers. I like to get that cover off the other side. I think that's the coolant passages in the block. I'm not for sure, but I think it is. And then we'll get the oil pan off and get these pistons out. Okay, I think we'll go ahead and get this distributor cap out of the way, pull the oil filter out, which I have not looked at yet, so I don't know what that looks like. Then we'll get this tappet cover off. Oh, that's actually way better than I thought it was going to be. Like a lot better. Look how clean that is. Wonder if the oil pan has anything different to say. That thing, yeah, it doesn't look that bad at all. All right. It's a little gooky in there, but relatively decent. Alright, we got that off. You can see in the oil pan here. Pretty clean. I pulled a little bit of the gasket off and just threw it in there. It's a little sludgy in the bottom, but pretty good. Then crawl under here, take a look at the lower end. You can see they kept the main bolt, the main cap bolts from turning with some baling wire. That's how they did it. And the rods have steel tabs on them to keep them from backing off. Your oil sump and pick up. These are kind of neat. They flip up and down. I don't know if that's if you bash the pan in or why they did that. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to get these rod caps off and then go ahead and pull the pistons out. Alright, I got my rod caps off down below on 1 and 4. You always want your stroke all the way down so you can get the ratchet or impact or whatever you got to take them off. So these rods, you'll see the bottoms of them kind of, they almost hook on to the crank. They don't go straight down. So I'll just spin the crank over, push them up to the top, like so. And a little persuasion. I always use, if you have a rubber mallet, great. I just use the wood end of a handle on a hammer. There's our piston. You can see that rod, how it has that. So when it sits on there, you just spin the crank one way and it'll push it up for you. So you don't have to reach up past the crank. Wow. So what we had going on there, which actually worked out, that ring ridge was so deep that the piston rings were catching on that. A lot of times guys there's actually a tool you can cut those so the piston will just slide out. I prefer to just beat the absolute life out of them, and they usually give up and come out. So yeah, finally got that. It didn't hurt it at all. I usually, you're going to be replacing the bearings anyway, so when I'm hitting on that, I just hit right onto this bearing here in the center, tapping on it, trying to get it to push up. That way you're not ruining any of the edges that the rod cap bolts to. Now it came out the hardest. Remember, that was the one that the cylinder head looked like it had the most oil going through it, so that makes sense. Now I can show you. Uh-oh, maybe not. Well, I still might need to go get my puller. So that's just not going to slide right out. But anyway, you can see the sleeve here. You know, these are a sleeved engine, which is awesome because then they're rebuildable. You can rebuild a non-sleeved engine, but then you need machine work done. You got to bore it out. You know, if your crosshatch is gone and you're out of spec. These, you can just pull a liner out, slam a new one in, put your new piston in, you're good to go. Okay guys, this is my sleeve puller. Well, it's actually my grandpa's. He built this, made it, and when he passed away, I ended up getting it. So, it's his, but it's mine. These are my pipe wrenches and everything. So, how this works is we have these different size slugs in here, a threaded rod, and a stand, and a bearing, and 2 plates. So what will happen is we're going to take these, I think these are the right size. I'm going to come over to our sleeve. Hang on, I got to turn the brightness up a little bit. That's a little better. And what will happen is that one of these slugs, might be that one, fits on the bottom of the sleeve. This goes up from the bottom, and then this one goes inside the piston sleeve. That threaded rod runs through here, and you bolt those together, and then you set that T-bar up, and then you're able to suck that. When you tighten that nut down, it's going to pull that whole assembly up and pull the sleeve out with it. So I'm going to set you guys back up on the tripod. I'll get that set up, and I'll show you how I set it up, and then I'll show you how to pull them out. I'm going to start with number 1. I know 3 is almost halfway out, but I'd rather show pulling one out that's still in and not didn't unintentionally come out. So first thing is send the rod in, and then it's been a while since I used this thing. This on here, where'd my bearing go? There's a thrust bearing, I think that's what you call those, and then the nut. And I put a decent amount of oil on these threads. I don't want to, if I have to really torque hard on this, I don't want them to possibly get stretched, damaged, whatever. Our discs, I'm going to go from the bottom up and put these in and put a nut on them. got that set up now. Our stands here. When we suck this nut down, it's going to pull this rod up. It has those slugs underneath. First thing I'm going to do before I start doing anything is, now that I have this just lightly snugged up, I want to go underneath and make sure that those slugs are centered on that liner. I don't want to pull that up against the block. So I'm going to make sure that's centered. Then we'll start tightening this down. It should lift that sleeve out. These are these fit in really tight. A lot of guys, when they install them, you actually freeze them to drop them in. So sometimes they come out, sometimes they can be real bare. But we'll get it. That looks good. Then we're going to tighten it down. See that liner as I'm tightening this, starting to lift that out. There's our piston sleeve. So now you guys can get a better view of how this tool works. These are the slugs I was talking about, and they're just a tiny bit smaller than the outside of the sleeve. So you're pulling up, you're just pulling on the sleeve, and the reason I use two on there, one's in the middle, in the center. So if this would ever pull hard, you know, you'd have a chance of bending this disc, and then it wouldn't catch on anything and it'd slide up and it'd probably get lodged in the cylinder. So if you put one in the middle, then you know there's only about a gap that big around there, so you're not going to be able to bend that as easily. It makes it a lot thicker. The threaded rod we pull up on, and here's the block. The liner is going to sit down inside. I call these counter bores. You know, they counter bore that, and the liner sits in flush with the block. And they're not a wet sleeve, just dry. I believe there is coolant flowing around that bore, but yeah, they're a dry press sleeve. So I'm going to get these other three out. All right, so we got all of our sleeves out now. See our mess of parts that we have over here. It's not bad at all. I mean, these are really simple tractors. They're easy to work on. You don't really have to take a ton of stuff off to overhaul it. So not bad for I think I've been here for about I might have done this 5-6 hours, which is, I'm not really running or anything like that. And if you like my table, it's actually a pallet. So this tractor is in a storage unit that I'm renting. It's my boat behind it, and I needed a table to work on. And the reason I'm doing it this way is that I could have worked on it in that barn, except it's November in Iowa, and even though the weather's been great so far, it could easily take a turn for the worse anytime. And also that it's an old barn, so it has a dirt floor, and I didn't really want to be rolling around on dirt to do this and getting dirt in the engine, and not really ideal clean overhauling situations. If anybody's curious, I believe the serial number 360 594. 360594 is the serial number on it. So, all right. Okay, guys, I think that's gonna do it for today. I got everywhere that I wanted to get today. You know, I wanted to get everything stripped down. The kits I'm looking at ordering, they want to know your rod journal sizes, you know, in case the crankshafts have been turned in the past. That way you can make sure you get the right bearing sizes. Due to COVID, you know, everything takes 70 billion years to ship, so I only want to have to order it once and wait one time, not twice for different size bearings that were wrong in the first place. We're just going to measure it, make sure. Yeah, I think this is going to be part one of many. I got a lot of work left to do to this tractor, and you know, there's still another one sitting down there that definitely will be a will it start, because it's seized right now, it's locked up, and that one actually needs a little bit more work than this one. So we got a lot of these cool videos coming up. Thanks to everybody that's watching, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Really, I like doing this stuff. You know, I'm hoping to put a lot more content out there. Let me know what you guys think. If there's anything I could do different that would be better, or anything like that. I bought a microphone for my camera, so I think that's going to help with the audio. I got to get the focus figured out, but it's all learning curves as we go. So yeah, thanks a million, guys. We'll catch you next time.